You can fan yourself. You don't want the paper.
Oh, okay.
10-minute Madam Chair.
Who do we have?
Let's see, we should have
This is
Rachel,
our first blended meeting.
Rachel virtually, I see Rachel, and Anne might join us if she could get on. But she has something come up at work and she's unable to be here in person. So see Rachel?
Hi.
You're driving, that's even better, thank you.
It is 3 o'clock. So are we good to start?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair.
Right. I hereby call to order the Independent Ethics Review Board meeting on Wednesday, September 29th, 2021. Item 1 is public comment. Is Mr. Secretary on?
Natalie, do
Yes, we do not have anybody. There's no public comments.
There's no public comments. So item 2 is, should be on the minutes. Consideration of an action on the minutes of the June 10th, 2021 meeting. Are there any comments or questions regarding the minutes?
Motion to accept.
Motion to
Second.
approve, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes approved. Item 3 is recent articles of interest. So these are the articles that were so generously reviewed and provided for our discussion. The first one is the article regarding the city of Colleen city council that killed their ethics ordinance that was recommended by one of the council members. Anybody have any thoughts or discussions around this particular article?
I think it's that exact behavior that triggered Sugarland to really want to have an independent ethics committee. Because you can't have city council be their judge and their jury.
I thought it was interesting that, it's a rejection of almost accountability. So I thought that was interesting, like for a message towards their voter population, but I also think now it's almost no longer the leading practice, it's common practice. So it's almost going the other way where it's an anomaly or an outlier to not have some sort of a governing body, review board, checks and balances mechanism. So I thought it was interesting that it is a smaller city, but they're not tiny for sure. So I thought it was interesting.
There's one comment where somebody said, I personally don't see it as a right to let a citizen decide the fate of another citizen.
Hey, that's
We
how
do
our
that every
jury
day in the
system.
jury, so I thought that was amazing.
Well, every time you see all the turmoil in these cities, the first thing the media wants to say is this, the good old boy, mentality they have. So at least the independent board helps take away that stigma.
Even if what we hope we never have to actually do anything, the fact that there's a body there and a mechanism for that accountability, I think that's a bigger purpose than even having, hopefully we never have to actually action on what we're putting forth and what we're reviewing later today, but it's the fact that we have a mechanism and we have procedures and that we have a governing document and board that's,
It wasn't
sets the tone.
clear to me in Colleen, was that just for city council as opposed to all appointed and elected officials?
It was the other city, I think, that was talking about it.
Yeah.
Universal.
But we
I
made
get that I'm
we
getting
made a
confused,
point.
yeah.
Well, they also referenced a case that they wanted the ethics policy for, and it was, somebody was accused of sexual harassment, which that's not an ethics issue, that's a legal issue.
Well, there should be other mechanisms to address that
Absolutely.
already in place for that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Community should have the right to say to an appointed or elected person, thank you.
the one thing I thought was interesting that they said that they didn't want a citizen judging another citizen. I was curious what they perceive
Yeah.
themselves to be
Right,
as elected
Good
officials.
point.
Do they
which
have
is
courts
also
up
like
there?
a feeling of above the law, above
Mhm.
the requirements and, you know. but- Rachel, did you have a comment?
You're muted.
It was the same thing. That one comment stood out. And I
Yeah.
thought, isn't that what we do when we go into court? It's another human being saying, here, I'm going to judge whether you have your life or liberty with you.
And it's the same premise. I was just called for Sugar Land jury duty, not even a month ago. And it's, again, everything got dismissed at the last moment, but again, because you had the body there and you had that ability, you know, that's what can sometimes move things along in the right direction. Hopefully the right direction, who's to say? Any other
But
comment?
elected offices, they are accountable to the public. I mean, it's just, that's why they're in office, to represent us, so they're accountable to us.
I agree with everyone's comments that it almost sounded like they thought they were above.
What is the let me see if I'm on. What is
You're
the, okay, what is the procedure that they have? So at the end of it, it says, we will revisit the item at a later date. If they couldn't get anybody to second this in this round, what's the procedure? Like, let's say if that happened here in Sugar Land, right? I mean, we of course have the Ethics Commission in place, but when you have something that says, oh, we're going to revisit this, does it just go wash away with the water, or does it get onto an agenda at a later date?
But for city council here, it just depends. Typically, if city council tables an item, they will send direction back to staff and tell us what we need to do. And once we've accomplished that, we will put it on a future agenda. And so if they say, we want to revisit this after you have researched A, B, and C, well, then we'll get on it. We'll research A, B, and C, or we'll do a survey of residents, or we'll go out and hold a town hall on something. And once we get the answers back, we will put it back on the agenda. I'm not sure if that's what's done in Killeen, but that would be how we would handle it here.
I got the impression they were going to do, they wouldn't do anything unless something happened,
Yeah.
right? They would force them to do it because above that one around the citizens, to not let a citizen decide the fate of another citizen, they were talking about it being redundant. So it almost sounded like they were trying, their idea was they were going to create this ethics board inside of themselves, but then they say that, well, if we included city staff and council, it would be a conflict of interest. So I didn't understand that comment. And that, well, you're saying it's redundant, but at the same time, you're saying it's conflict of interest if it's one and the same body. So I got the impression that until they were forced to do something, they were gonna handle it on their own. Is what they thought,
Or not handle it.
or not handle it.
Yeah. One of the things that have been discussed when we do is that ultimately, whether you have an ethics commission or not, you have an election day. And that also gives the voters an option. Assuming you trust the elections, it's not, but. But ultimately, if the voters in that town disagree with their decision on election day, they can go, I'll show you how much I disagree with your decision. Yeah.
That happens.
So long as there's somebody running against them, yes.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to go ahead and move forward with the Dallas article.
Is that the non-native grass?
Yeah,
I missed it. What did you say?
That's the non-native
Yeah.
grass.
People are behaving the last few months. I was reading a lot of options.
Okay. No.
Which is great.
I was happy that people are behaving, but it usually gets more interesting than these.
I think it's interesting and I love that you pull from across the state because, and not just, I mean, Dallas is a major city, but Killeen, it's, might be comparable to a Sugar Land or, I don't know, size of population, but we're not city of Houston. So it's a little bit different, but at the same time, we hold ourselves to a higher standard, which I think is important, but I think the articles help us understand what's going on and what are other councils and boards seeing that we should be mindful of, because it's also like a exercise, you know, because we'll take a break for a quarter and come back and, you know, your mind's not going in that direction. So these help remind us, you know, what are we looking for? What are we here to do, and stay sharp in that mechanism, in that manner.
Yeah, I try to provide you whatever their local paper thought was worthy of printing, what their citizens found to be questionable, so that although you're held to the accountability of what your neighbors all think, this is what that group of citizens thought, and just kind of let y'all think through it.
When things can happen there, they can happen.
Absolutely, you can have a party before you open up the park. I think we had 2 of those articles. Someone hosted a wedding at a park. I digress, go ahead.
So comments around Dallas article?
When I was first reading it, you know, I was thinking, well, yeah, it's just obvious this guy overstepped his bounds, telling them what to do, but you know, then as you read deeper and they throw in the thing about the winter damage. And so you start thinking about what we saw here. I mean, what was his intent? Was it that the place really did look really bad, nasty, and needed to be fixed, but he still didn't handle it the correct way. But, you know, you gotta wonder about the intent. If it was something that was done properly and he just didn't like it, he did that, yeah, that would be like more, I guess, an intentional act compared to the place really did look pretty ratty from the winter damage and actually saying something. But either way, he stepped outside his authority, my feeling, what he did there. So.
I just thought the issue was out of the scope of what an ethics board would consider. Am I right?
Without looking at what their ethics ordinance says, I would say yes, it's outside the scope.
I did notice it was an anonymous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's what I
which we
underlined.
Exactly. At
And
that point,
I didn't see where the commissioner gained anything from changing the graph. Personal, there was no personal gain. So like you said, I think he would be out of the ethics.
and in our case, if it's not,
If government wasting money is an
Sign.
ethics issue, give me some forms.
so we won't listen to anonymous.
This one would not make it past my desk because it wouldn't be signed, so it would not come before the board.
Have there been many that haven't made it past your desk?
She can't tell.
Oh, she can't.
No, I'm just
Oh, I was like, really? I didn't
Well, no,
know.
my obligation under the code of ordinance is to make sure that it's within the time period, that it's signed and sworn, and that the person who the complaint is filed against is within the purview. So it's got to be a person this applies to, and it's got to be a violation of this, or the potential violation. If those 3 things are met, I give it off to you, hire you an outside attorney, and you can hold a hearing. We have fortunately find something wooden around here, not put anything in fine, never had that.
So let's say his behavior did violate the city charter.
That would go to the ethics commission. That would be,
That is an ethics
that would-
violation.
it would not be so, that would be a loophole. That's a good question.
So is there a legal path for somebody to complain about somebody violating the city charter? Other than ethics?
That's a good question. I know that if there's a residency requirement or something like that, you're automatically forfeit your position because you're no longer eligible.
Okay.
But that's, I will look into that. Thank you.
Not that I want to go read the city charter.
Our charter is actually, not ours is short. We've got a good one. We just redid it. That's a good question.
He was a
And not
project
that
manager.
20,000 is not nothing, but I mean, $10.5 million project. I
Yeah,
was like, also my
exactly.
materiality threshold's a little.
If he was. But it looked like he was an employee of the city, right? Project manager, something like that. In which case, it says a project manager and program manager. That would make, in Sugar Land, they would be an employee and covered by a different ethics policy than elected or appointed.
The person the complaint was against was a councilman.
It was
Okay.
3. It was a
Yeah.
council member, a project manager,
Right.
and a program
And it said the
manager.
council member interfered with city management, which they're not supposed to do according to their city charter. Apparently.
Correct. You do have to go to the city manager directly. You cannot go to an individual
Right.
employee.
Too many names. in there to keep track of.
Yeah.
And it gets worse in the other.
Get challenging to follow
Granbury?
after a while.
Yeah.
I think you got two for Granbury.
Yes.
You got page 1 and page 2, or first act and second act.
And I read them in reverse order. So it was like a spoiler alert, like by the time, I'm like, well, I already know what happened.
I may have uploaded them. in reverse
I don't know if
order.
they were or not. I just know that I read the first one and then I got to the next and it was like, what are they going to do? I'm like, oh, I already know the answer to this one.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
I uploaded them in reverse order.
Did you, I could have easily just printed it.
Judging by the numbers at the bottom.
Oh, there
That's
you
my
go.
error, Yes.
Takes a little bit of the deductive reasoning out. Huh? So this was probably my favorite to review from a perspective. I cannot wait to hear what you guys think as far as their outcome and, you know, different things that you would have wanted to look at or reviewed or questioned.
This is interesting.
Comments?
Everybody's gonna be quiet on that.
Well, okay,
Go ahead.
so is this an acceptable time to bring up a prior discussion? About council member?
That is our hypothetical that we're going to do after
Oh,
this
okay.
agenda
Hold on,
item.
hold on to the top.
But you could discuss this.
It just made me think of a hypothetical.
So
It's a great transition.
I read this and the complaint was that Jarrett, I guess is that the mayor, uses city status to endorse somebody for a political candidate.
Mhm.
And I couldn't find in our ethics policy that that was a violation. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but
I think it's something about using your
Your
personal
position.
position to influence.
I just remember the discussion about having to wear your personal hat versus
Yeah.
your
yeah,
city or
Your city
professional
hat.
hat.
yeah.
And what, you know, what hat are you wearing when you actually do the act or the endorsement or whatever?
And where does social media fall in all of this too, right? So if it's his personal
They
social
said
media,
specifically it was his
It was
political
campaign,
Facebook
like,
account.
yes.
And it had him labeled as, at the time of the post, it had him labeled as the mayor.
Mhm.
okay.
Did
And
you
then
read
they
that?
changed it.
And then
And they
Well,
changed
Yeah.
it and
Yeah.
they
So that
shred all the
already-
I guess
evidence.
he's
That
doing
already
something
tells
that's
you
not
there's
shared for
something going
substantial
on.
Yeah, why did
segment
you
of the
have
city
to change it?
population,
Where he's using his
Something-
official
Yeah.
position
right?
to influence or attempt to influence others to take a certain action.
But it says, goes on to say may result in a personal or financial benefit.
Okay.
Which it won't, but it's not shared with the
It could be
segment of the
personal.
city.
The personal benefit could be a
It could-
council alliance.
Right,
Yeah.
who it's on the council, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay,
Quick, quid pro quo.
okay,
I'll get you elected and you vote for all of the projects.
That's right.
That's an interest, no, this is, how- and your interpretation is what counts, not my interpretation, because it's the will of the board, not my decision. I would have read this, that he was using his official position to influence people to vote for this person. And at the end of the day, like you said, it would have been a personal benefit to him because he wouldn't endorse somebody you don't like.
I'm just replaying these commercials in my head that I've heard from certain people, and I could have sworn they said, I'm mayor so-and-so, and, you know, but I could be wrong.
Well, but this is a good discussion
Yeah.
because your viewpoint and your interpretation is what counts, not mine.
Yeah, but so political endorsements happen all the time, right? And they're out. And so that's what I was struggling with, like, that seems more normal, that it didn't seem unusual that this candidate or the mayor endorsed this candidate.
Doesn't it come down to what the code of ethics is
Yeah.
for the city of Sugar Land?
Mhm.
That's what you're ruling against, not what, because I had that struggle as well, because I see that all the time, but to me, you're judged by the position that you hold in Sugar Land. I mean, there's probably other codes of ethics that they are violating potentially, but they're, you know, it just depends upon, I think, in the lane that you're in, what are you obligated to follow, right, from an ethics standpoint?
Well, I will tell you, we have had an employee who received quite a bit of discipline a little bit back because in their city uniform, they endorsed a county candidate,
Yeah.
county office position. And that person lost 2 weeks' pay because they said, with the city of Sugar Land,
Uh-uh.
I endorse so-and-so for this position.
Yeah.
And wearing our uniform,
In what forum?
social media. Well, actually, that candidate had it as a Facebook ad with our employee wearing his police uniform, endorsing the guy for sheriff, saying I endorse him as a police officer, as a fellow police
okay.
officer. And I said, that's great. And the chief said, hey, 2 weeks off.
Yeah.
Because you do not use your
Right.
official position.
Right.
If they-
At least in the employee handbook, we do not allow that.
If they stood up and said, I'm Mary Davis, I think this person would be a great city leader.
If this
That's
person was in his plain
personal.
clothes.
If
that's
she said,
fine.
hi, I'm Mary Davis, Mayor of Sugar Land, and I endorse this person, then it's as the mayor.
Mhm.
I think Rachel had a comment.
Hi, I'm looking at, one of the things that was written in there is that he blames the posts on his staff. He says that was maintained, my Facebook page or social media is being maintained by staff. Ultimately, the buck still stops with the boss, whether it was maintained or not, because you still set parameters for what your staff can or cannot say. I bring this up because I've seen this before where, they'll wash their hands and go, oh, I had nothing to do with that. It was my staff. Well, you trained your staff. You're supposed to know what your staff says or does, especially when it's on your social media channels.
Yeah.
That, and I think, you always hear it in commercials at the end of the commercial, they go, I'm so-and-so, I approved this message.
You're probably doing the
So-
Texas election
Right,
or
so
federal election code, yeah.
they have to approve it at that point, and they don't have the ability to say, I didn't know that was going up there, because you have to know whether you actually did or not. You're still responsible.
Is that caveat required on social media? I know it's on, airways, but is it also?
Yes, and on the back of any sign that's posted outside our billboard, it's got to have a reference to that statute.
Fine print?
Because you're using it, your political, if it's paid for out of your political campaign funds, you have to say paid for, approved by.
Okay.
So when we go pull up those illegal signs, week after the election, we go, put them on your front porch. You owe me $50, here's your ticket. For littering.
Learned something today.
Yay!
That is a value add.
You want to segue to the next,
Sure.
your hypothetical?
Yes, on the hypotheticals in the executive summary, yes. For the review and discussion on ethics hearings procedures. Is it down here?
Yes, and I can read it if you prefer. You
Oh,
know.
that's great. You go right
Okay.
ahead.
This hypothetical was actually suggested to me by one of your co-members, Mr. Wolf. And I played around with the language just a little bit, but we're gonna use this hypothetical to see the latest draft, what revisions I need to continue to make on your rules of procedure. But hypothetically, there's a brother for a candidate for the city council, and this brother wants to host a fundraiser to pay off an incumbent's campaign debt. In exchange for that incumbent endorsement of his brother. So, like it was, like I said, this was Mr. Wolf's. I keep wanting to call you Mr. Fox after Conrad said that one day, and I can't get past that.
That's it.
Mr. Wolf's hypothetical. So if you want to add any additional details or facts to clarify your hypothetical,
Hypothetical fact.
I will not say that these are facts. I will
I'm
say
sorry,
that
details.
they are hearsay at best.
Details with no names.
Right. What I heard is that a term limited city council member
Was approached.
was approached by a candidate. And the candidate was, well, if you endorse me. Just the other way around.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically,
So what you told me,
the
because we're live streaming,
outbound,
we're live streaming,
yes,
we're live streaming.
yeah,
So what you told me was that you had heard in this city or a different city that an incumbent was approached by someone running for position and said, hey, I understand you have some campaign debt. If I host a fundraiser to pay off your debt, will you endorse me?
Right, so it was a term limited person on the way out.
Was the fundraiser before or after they vacated their office?
They were still in office
Okay,
because
when they were
hold,
approached.
they hold until the person is
Okay.
elected to fill their
Right.
seat. I don't know if this person was filling that seat or not, because hypothetically, we're just making stuff up.
Right.
It was standing
In
room
a
only, there were
city.
no seats.
Does it matter if they're still in office because they're bound by the ethics for another year or two? I believe.
That's a very good question.
So,
So,
So.
there's a couple different provisions as far as once you leave office,
yeah,
appearances and, well, right next to appearances.
I know you can't,
Is for appearances and representations is 2 years, and conducting business with the city is 13 months.
So essentially, is it appropriate for me to endorse you if you pay off my debt?
Can you be bought?
So I'm on my way out. I served my 15th year for 3 5-year, whatever terms I can. You're running, I have $50,000 in debt. I say to you, I will endorse you as a candidate if you'll pay off my debt.
Yeah, but
Or,
is that endorsement coming from him as the, I guess it's a council member, or is that he's going to endorse him just as a citizen? So I think legally as a citizen, from what we've been talking about, he could endorse him. Joe Blow,
Mhm.
I endorse Silly Sally.
For me, it was more of an issue. Is it acceptable for someone in Sugarland
In a
to
city.
buy? No, well,
Okay.
this might not have happened here, but if it did happen here,
Yeah.
are we okay with one of our council members selling or a candidate buying an endorsement?
Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna ask you to get your draft hearing procedures out, because we're gonna walk through this. Because this is how I know where the holes are and what to fix for your next meeting. Okay. So we've got the intake, it's been signed and sworn, it's been filed with the city secretary. It's been presented to me, and I verified that the council member, the incumbent is a council member in the city of Sugarland, so this person would be subject to the code of ethical conduct. I also verified that the complaint has been filed within the time period. They believe that this has happened within 1 year of the time they come to file against me. And I believe that this question could be covered under the code of ethics, so it's now presented to you. So you've been given the hypothetical. So you're now on page 28.
I have a question
Yes.
of your assessment
Yes.
or review. When you review if the question is covered by the code of ethics, do you reference the section?
You know, I don't know, since we've never had one. What I would hope, yes, please. What I would hope is that when the person comes in and says, I think somebody violated the code of ethics by doing blank, 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 and blank, that they will have cited it. I do not want to influence this board or to say, by my saying, oh, section 2-77, I don't want you to think, aha, she's already identified it, therefore it's wrong. And that we have to find for, because it is not my judgment to make a determination whether or not something has been violated. And so,
Right, so would you at that point be similar to a grand jury? You're not saying
I would be a
to the
grand jury, and
jury,
it's a good example,
right? Like,
yes.
she's not saying, because I'm handing you this to review, something was done incorrectly, something, a rule was violated. Merely, there's enough evidence in this statement that you need to look at it.
What I'm saying is that there's an allegation, and if you believe the allegation is correct, it would be a violation of something in this code.
So we.
Once I've
right.
done that, I'm done. I
Just
hire an
because
outside
Meredith
attorney
gives
for
us
all advice,
something-
because I'm conflicted at that point in time.
That shouldn't influence our opinion at all, just because it was forwarded on to us as to whether something did or didn't happen.
Yeah, and I make no judgment, pass no judgment whatsoever on the merits.
And for somebody out of office, what's the course of action against them that's allowed?
If they're out, if they're no longer in office and it's a violation, they're subject to the same things that they currently would be subject to, with the exception of recall. You can write a letter of recommend, you can fine them, you can shake your fingers at them.
Yeah,
And in a case like this, it also might go to the person who, if that person was elected because of that paid endorsement. And so if the candidate who paid for the endorsement got elected and then was found to have violated the policy, it would definitely affect
So
that.
you could have two defendants.
Correct.
so you can do like a recall on that person.
That is an option, yes. So if we're back on the procedures,
You'd have two respondents in that.
But just to clarify on that, so if somebody, when they put in their complaint, they're saying, yep, this is what we complain about. So you initially then have to make the interpretation unless they cite something in the code of ethics that it did violate something in the code of ethics. I mean, from an interpretation standpoint.
So I would say that the question, and I would say it differently, but when you're reviewing it, that's why I asked about a citation, because in your mind, you would say this question, we don't know if there's merit to this or not, but it would be covered. The subject matter might be covered under 3 sub.
no, it's gonna be just like these articles that I keep sending you.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go, ooh, there's something in here that I believe could be covered by this. And so I'm gonna say, just like these articles that we've been practicing on, here you go, look through it, what violations do you see? It's not for me to find, it's for you to make it. I cannot influence you at all. But it's like these articles you keep practicing. That's the whole reason I'm sending you these articles. So you have these discussions and you can start looking at them and going, oh, wait a minute, this is anonymous. It's not covered under our code. Or, they've said this, or they've said that, and therefore it might be under the code.
You're just assessing that there's enough validity to
Yes, ma'am.
to that, and then we make the assessment against the.
But we can still ask you the questions like what's in the city charter or whatever, like.
No,
Bill's
I
not
will
allowed-
hire an outside attorney to represent you, and that attorney will be sitting through every meeting, holding your hand, answering whatever legal questions you want. But once it gets past that initial viewpoint for me that whether or not it's under
She
the code.
walks out the door.
Well, if I'm
Yeah.
contracted out, I can
Yeah.
no longer help you because I'm the one that provides the training to the elected and appointed officials. I'm the one that can write the get out of jail free card. At that point, I can't be
Mhm,
unbiased.
Right.
And this board deserves someone who is neutral. And so you will have an attorney hired to handle that appeal with you. I can be in the room, I can watch, I can, cheer you on, but I will not answer questions at that point in time because I need this to be as accurate and transparent as possible.
And that happened in the Granberry case, right? That they were
Mhm,
hired
they did.
outside counsel,
Yeah.
You're
I
right.
don't remember every
Yeah, I
too
think
much.
so.
I don't think they ever used them, but they have.
but they were
Right,
available.
Yeah, I have two
So-
law firms that are on standby that I do absolutely no other work
It's-
for them, but they do municipal work. And so that they will be able to provide at least 4 different names for us to choose from if this comes forward. But these people have never done work for us because I don't want anybody to be
there's no-
holding on us for anything else.
I don't want to get too far off topic, but it seems to me like this could be a violation of the Texas election code as well, perhaps. Having to do
Perhaps.
with campaigns and campaigning.
Perhaps.
And I was under the understanding that if there was a criminal violation going on, we might step aside until that was resolved, so nothing that we did interfered with that. Call witnesses and those types of things. Maybe. Seems like it would be appropriate for us not to.
I think that would depend on what item you believe was violated. So if you think that the only violation is the campaign violation, then yes, you would step aside and say, we recommend that this be referred to the police department for investigation.
Okay.
And you, hands off, or the district attorney's office for investigation, hands off. If you think it's that plus something else, you can say, okay, we believe this part needs to be hand off, but we're gonna look at this violation and we're gonna address this violation.
Got it.
Good question.
And I don't remember what the sunset was on the ethics policy. There isn't supposed to be reviewed every couple of years.
We did not sunset it because every quarter when I send you an article, if you see something that you
Okay.
think needs to be
So,
changed, it's up, it's up.
and that's part of our responsibility too, it's a living document that, oh, we never thought someone would do something that slimy.
Yes.
Now we have to add that.
Mhm.
So if
And
you
then-
do something like this, we're like, oh, doesn't pass the smell test, we need to update the policy. That's our responsibility as well.
Yeah, so any hypotheticals you want to review, send them to me. I'm happy to put them on your next board. But my goal today is actually to take this hypothetical and let me continue to update your procedures, because I'm hoping we never have to use them, but I want them to be ready in the event you need them. So we're already on page 28B. It's now in front of you for the review.
So I did have a question on, I know it's past B, but on number 4 about the 17 days. Does that mean that the meeting has to occur within 17 days, or the meeting has to be scheduled within 17 days?
It will be scheduled within 17 days.
I wasn't super clear on.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The meeting will be scheduled within that 17 days, because that we have built in time to get through all the different reviews. We've counted them up. So the city secretary has to get to me within 7 days. I have to review it. I have to give you a written opinion. And then we have to schedule the meeting, and we still have posting requirements under state law. And so we figured that, we're already 10 days, 12 days in. So once we get that complaint, we're gonna start calling and polling and trying to get it all set up.
Okay,
So scheduled, but not held.
Ideally, it would be held within that time period, but most likely within those 17 days, we'll have a date set. This is the date we'll be meeting. That works for everyone's calendar.
And that's work days? Or any days?
Calendar days.
and not to get to the nitty gritty later on, it specifies calendar days versus. work-
Okay, that's
So
good.
I don't know if you need to be consistent as far as,
Would you like it to be calendar or work days? Business days.
calendar's good, anybody else?
This is your document. Do you want
More
calendar or
more
business?
time would be allowed though, right, if it was
Take
business
out the
days.
weekends, and especially if you got a holiday thrown in there or something, then you're even further behind the 8 ball, so.
Do you have a preference, Rachel?
That would give about a month if it was 17 business
Business
days.
days.
So based on the seriousness of the complaint, do you want that person still sitting there on your board or on city council? And then you still have to investigate it and you still have to review it.
Well, it doesn't mean we couldn't do it sooner. We just have to do it with them.
Well, 17, I could tell you that there's no way we can get this scheduled.
Yeah.
Well, because it's the city secretary has 7 days to get it to me.
So where did the 17 come from? Is
The
that-
17 was my doing math in my head.
okay,
of
so-
trying-
10
to
plus
come
the
up-
7.
Yeah. Of how we could get everybody together, do a poll, can you meet? I just added.
And it's
10 to the
20
Do we
calendar
need, we'll need
days?
to review the case. We'll need time for that before we meet, right?
Um,
So,
It will be sent to you and you will review it as a group,
okay,
because you cannot do anything outside of the group. It's gonna be a hearing, it's like a courtroom. You can't go and look at the scene of the crime outside of the group. All discussions, all information is provided to you within that group. You can't do your own research. Any discussions you want, you have to have on the record in the group with everybody. It's like a juror. You cannot go out
Mhm.
and do your own thing. You have to do it as a group.
Meredith, is there a harm in making it working days instead of calendar?
No, ma'am, it just spreads it out.
But we could still do it sooner. It's just if there
We can
were
put
holidays
them.
or stuff falling in there, that would give us a little bit more leeway.
I just think one way or the other, we need to be consistent throughout the document. So it'll get confusing if something's subject to 10 business days and then something else is 17 calendar days. Like I think whatever way we go, we should probably keep it pretty consistent throughout the document, so it's not confusing.
Okay, I need to backtrack and correct what I said here. Okay, so the reason why it says that is 298 preliminary, and I apologize, I wrote this right after the last meeting, after we took notes. Forgot to look at it. So the preliminary review of complaints, within 7 days of receiving it from the city secretary, I will do my review and say, yes, it's bad, or no, and forward it to you. And then within 10 business days from you receiving the report and my recommendation that you hold a public hearing, you will render a decision as to whether it shall be dismissed. So yes, you will meet within those 17 days.
Okay.
And it does need to be business days.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, thank you. I backtrack. And you're not actually deciding at that meeting, guilt or innocence, you're just saying, um,
Investigator discuss.
and what additional information do you need? What witnesses do you need? It's your initial, here you go, I've looked at this, here's your article, you know, powwow around it, what do you need?
Just wanted to point out down here, you say calendar days when it's responsive or responding.
Okay.
And I
thank you.
don't know if that's comes from that document, it should be business or not.
Okay, thank you. I'll fix that. So actually, I'm gonna go back. Let's ignore that part because I'm looking at the actual ordinance and there's various calendar and business. So let me go back and verify all those.
Yeah.
So ignoring my mistake on calendar or business, look at your procedure, please.
So I think last time we made it all the way up until, I think, the hearing part. So we received this complaint.
Did you want me to tell you the revisions I made?
Oh, yeah.
I should have probably given you a red line. Okay, so at the last meeting, you asked for a definition of good faith reliance, which I did add on the first page. Don't want to look at that.
What page number?
Page 27.
Okay.
Not to make this more convoluted, but if we, so in this, for this particular hypothetical, there could theoretically be two different respondents.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we have one hearing address both respondents?
Sure.
Okay.
Or you could say, I need more time, and we're gonna have two hearings.
Okay.
But you may determine as you're going through the facts are so intertwined, it may be easier to do as one. But that would be up to you at that time.
Okay.
So I added the definition of good faith reliance. And then if there's no comments on that, I took the language that Barbara recommended, review, I think it was Barbara who recommended it. Review and analyze documentation, provide and engage in independent fact finding to the extent necessary to clarify. And that's under D, investigation. Under the settlement, I added that either party can request the settlement. I added that the approval of the settlement occurs in a public hearing. Under the parties of the public, under parties at public hearing,
Can I ask a question on that?
oh, yes, please.
Sorry.
No, this is your meeting.
Okay, so, with respect to the public hearing for settlement process, so if we had our meeting within the, 17 days, whatever it is, scheduled it, we had our meeting, we say, we want to look at this document, that document, we want to talk to these 6 people. And then while we're waiting for those things to get compiled for the actual
For the
hearing,
next
for the
meeting,
next meeting, which would be more of the formal hearing, right? Where they would bring documents and.
that was more of a trial,
Trial,
yes.
thank you, yes. And so at some point in there, a settlement request is initiated by either party and it's received by your office presumably,
City Secretary's office,
city secretary's office. Do we convene to discuss it
yes.
at that time? And then when we convene to discuss it, that's the public hearing, we can make the decision as to accept or reject that settlement request?
Yes, so the way we envision this is that you have your first meeting within those 17 days where you say, no, this is frivolous based on the factors that are in the code. Or no, this person's not subject to the code. City attorney had no idea what she was doing. She clearly, didn't have any caffeine and cookies that day. Or you go, yes, we need more information. And then you say, okay, city staff, how long do you think it'll take you to get the information? The city secretary's office will look at it and say, okay, this is in archives. It's gonna take us X amount of time to get to archives, or we can pull this up in Laserfish. What's your schedule look like? We'll schedule the next meeting. And so we'll go ahead and at that point in time, we'll say, okay, this is the time frame for the next meeting. And we'll try at that initial meeting to set the date of the next meeting.
Mhm.
And if we get a request for settlement within that time period, we'll notify you. And at that already set time, we'll say, okay, you have this request for settlement. here's the witnesses, here's the documents. You know, and you can talk the settlement stuff first, you can go through that, or you can have your witnesses and say, okay, based on this, we're willing to settle it. But you're gonna do it all at once.
Okay.
And even if you get that second meeting, you go, oh, this brought up a lot more questions, we need more information. And you go, city secretary's office, we need this additional stuff, and you just keep carrying it until you have enough information for you all to feel comfortable to make a determination. Or the other person to scream guilty, I quit, I resign, or whatever it may be.
So we can even delay accepting their settlement then? Is that what you're saying?
It depends. If you're
Yeah.
comfortable with the settlement based on the information you know, then your board can vote to accept the settlement. If you're not comfortable, you're saying, you know, I think that
Need a
maybe
little more info,
you know, probation's not enough, you need, you know, more of a slap on the wrist, then, you know, you can either negotiate with them, or you say, I want more information to make sure I'm comfortable with what you're proposing as a
You're
settlement.
not trying to pay it off quick and get out the door.
Right, or to stop the fact finding.
Exactly.
Okay. Oops, you know, my
Yeah,
bad.
let's settle this.
But you may say, sure, you're right, you know, it was a stupid mistake, you've acknowledged that you made a mistake, and we agree that a 250 fine is great, have a great day, write the check over here, goes to general fund, council gets an extra dinner someday, and life is grand.
On the hearing, the public hearing, so this is the complainant has the right to legal counsel.
Yes,
Why would the complainant need legal counsel?
I don't know, but if the
Okay.
respondent gets it, the complainant gets it.
Okay. And would the,
Because you also have the name clearing hearing at the end, so if you called me a liar, and I
Oh,
proved that
yeah.
you lied when you called me a liar, now you're coming after me at the
Defamation
next
suit.
hearing, you're.
okay,
Yeah.
and would the attorney that gets hired to be in the room with us, would they just be a resource, or would we look at them as prosecuting?
They are not prosecuting. You all are just a jury. So you ask questions and you ask witnesses, but actually, out of the 4 names I have, there's one that I would always have my go-to first, because I really respect this person. And he's done a phenomenal job. He's been licensed about 15, 20 years. He will make suggestions. He will not be the silent, sit in the corner kind of person. He'll be like me and go, well, have you looked at this? Or have you thought about this?
Even with all the training, we're gonna, I hope we never have to, but if we're all sitting in the room and none of us are lawyers.
This individual was a prosecutor for a number of years, a city attorney for a few years.
I just
and a
like to have
judge.
somebody there that we can,
So
that we can,
smaller
as
cities,
a group
but
go.
this is the most qualified
Right.
person I can come up with, who
Okay.
I have not hired to do something else. But this individual I see would be, having done contract work as a city attorney, as a prosecutor for both a county and a city, and sitting as a municipal court judge. I suspect this person's my number 1 out of the 4 choices, will own the room. He
You
will
know,
keep you on track,
Right, because
but he will not
having
be
never
asking the
done this
questions.
before, we might totally miss something that we're supposed to ask for, or.
Okay, now, this person will not do that for you. He is not going to question your witnesses. He may
No,
say,
but they
"Have you
might,
looked
they
at
might
the
say, "Yeah, you guys might wanna look at that," and we're like, oh, yeah, we didn't even realize that, thank you.
Sure.
Not necessarily lead us, but make sure that we're taking the right steps, or.
So when you're on the jury, you go back in that jury room. You
You're
don't
on
have
your own.
anybody.
You got the
helping
charge
you
in
with
front of you
anything.
Right, but we're
that
also
says,
doing
did they
the invest-
violate this, did they violate
But we're
that?
doing the investigation too, and at that point, we might.
And at that point, you might say, I need a witness that could tell me who attended this meeting. And that attorney might say, well, do you want the minutes from that meeting? Do you want the recording of that meeting?
Right.
And he may prompt you that way, but he's not gonna say, oh, do you want it from this meeting too? Or that meeting as well?
Right.
He can't do that. He's
not really a facilitator.
not really, that's correct. He's gonna keep you on track. He's gonna answer your legal questions, but your chair is your presiding judge and you're all the jury. You were
Jury.
selected. Well, you were selected because city council believes that you have the ability to represent the thoughts and
I just wanna know
opinions
what
of your
to
peers.
But
expect
it's also
from that
not a
person.
criminal trial too, so I mean,
Right.
you know, you have, we
It's
have to do our due
significantly lower
diligence and,
Right.
you know, conduct the investigation and look for the facts and ask the right questions, but at the same time, we're not, you know, putting someone away.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just take them out of service, serving on a board, worst case scenario.
You can't volunteer anymore.
Which is also why when we discussed the code and we didn't want the right to pull somebody from office, that would go back to the voters too. So we wouldn't, if it was a council member, we don't even have the authority to actually pull them and take them out of office. It would go back to the voters. So
Right.
there's, you know.
If you're voted in, you can only be voted out.
That's right.
City council doesn't have that authority to remove someone from office.
Makes sense.
And those were the additions I made. And I promise any changes we make today, I will give you a red line.
So when we're going through the hearing process and we've had our initial discussion, we said we want to look at these 20 documents, these video, audio recordings, whatever it is, we want to speak to, you know, these 5 individuals. How long is the actual hearing process in the sense of, depending on, it might need to be in 2 parts or 3 parts, just depending, if it's complex, or say we need to speak to numerous individuals and, you know, I saw in here where we can impose time limits, that's very helpful. I was actually going to ask with respect to time limits. It says that both the respondent and complainant can provide their initial case or
Opening statement.
opening statements, and it says short. Should we be able to put a time limit on that as well? Because short might be half an hour for.
All relative.
I would agree, it's all relative, but you may say 10 minutes.
Okay.
I can't imagine that unless it's a very, very complex complaint, that they're gonna need a day or an hour to
I was just
explain.
concerned about a very impassioned complainant.
I would not
Doing a
stick to 3
filibuster on us or
minutes.
something.
But you could say, you know, we'll give you each have 10 minutes to make your opening statements. You'll have an opportunity to present witness, cross-examine witness as we go. And if they get to the end and your timer goes off and you think they're wrapping it up, you can say, okay, you know, and they can ask for 2 more minutes. You can say 2 minutes, but it's a hard stop. But yes, if you want 10 minutes, that's what the federal court given me, you can have 10 minutes.
Rachel?
I have a question. So does the chair get the final say in what evidence is presented? What, you know, what's relevant, not relevant? Who has the final say? Is it the 4 people? I think I saw it says 4 people determine. But I wasn't quite sure what it means.
So the chair is the person that's running the show. But at the end of the day, admission of evidence or granting of time or cutting something off would require a vote, and it takes a majority vote. And because a full panel is 7 plus 2 alternates, it would take a vote of 4. So as much as I respect the chair is not all powerful. And the chair does not passing judgment. As a group, you are all passing judgment and making the decisions. And congratulations, you will be reappointed chair next week.
Oh, thank you.
So
And I think I read, and I'm lost where we are in the pages now, but during the actual hearing itself, it says the chair administers the oath, but any of the committee members or board members rather can ask questions. Is that correct?
Yes. Have you been to a city council meeting? This is my best way of explaining it. Where the mayor is kind of running the meeting, but someone will raise their hand and then the mayor will acknowledge it and that person has the floor and they get to talk. And then, you know, you can say follow up, give a second question, or they say thank you. And everybody gets to go once, and then you get to go again if you need to. But the mayor is the one that recognizes people and says, okay, do you have any more questions? Do you need any more information? You're just kind of like the teacher, you're like the teacher in the classroom, but everybody's participating in the discussion. That
It's like a giant whiteboarding session.
So I have a question of point of discussion. It says, all questioning of the witnesses will be done by the ethics board.
yes.
So the complainant can't ask questions and the respondent can't ask the witnesses questions. And I may not know the right question to ask when I'm on the review board. See what I'm looking at.
I do.
Yeah.
I copied this from a couple other cities.
And frankly, if I'm the respondent, I'd like to be able to ask people, the witnesses questions, if they're accusing me of something. maybe we don't want to allow that. I don't know.
Let's discuss it. Let me know if you want, I put the language in there if you want that. Do you
What
want
do
the
y'all think?
opportunity to cross-examine?
As long as it doesn't turn into a brawl.
Yeah, that's the only thing I
Yeah.
think about is how do you manage that?
Yeah.
Is there, I mean, this
So
might
what-
be odd, but like having a process where they can jot down and then it's collected and then the board vets questions as they're coming up?
There
Let the witnesses go through and give their statements, whoever the defendant is, he can make his notes, give him a chance to respond to what they accused him of, and then possibly give them like a 4-minute rebuttal if they wanted to say
A
something.
number.
I think there
There
is
is
a
a rebuttal
rebuttal
process.
process, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
It's just not a
That would-
questioning
that would
process.
keep it from getting into a two-way back and forth between a defendant and witness.
What do you think would be more fair? What would be able to give you enough information? So if you're not comfortable asking the right questions, but you want to keep it from being a brawl or the beating up of each other, what do you think will get you the most information for you all to be able to make a decision?
I mean, could we ask respondent and complainant questions?
Oh, absolutely.
We'll give,
That
they
I
can,
guess opens things up where if they did want to add more to a comment made by, you know, someone presenting facts, like I'm blanking on the term, the witness.
but they could also say, if you have anything else to say, give it to us in writing. Otherwise, we don't want to deliberate.
That's, I was going to suggest something to that extent, or that's
That's
already,
why we work together.
there's already something actually that alludes to that, is that they were able to provide up front. Both the respondent and the claimant have the opportunity to provide documents, witnesses, information before the hearing. And so I feel like they have the opportunity to provide supporting documentation, whatever modality that is. They have the opportunity, you know, we're going to be asking questions of the witnesses and we're going to be reviewing documentation for both sides. They have their opening statement and their rebuttal. I feel like it could get a little bit hairy or, you know, go down a few rabbit holes if you have cross back and forth. I don't
Really
know.
wouldn't- You know, a judge, like in a jury room, can have the control and say, well, you're out of order, particularly if they start badgering the witnesses that are on the stand. So I could see that happening if it was a, you know, real
We can
edgy
give them an
situation.
opportunity saying, okay, we think we have enough. We're going to deliberate. Is there anything else you wish to let us know? Either side.
That would be number 10, the closing summation.
Right.
Yeah.
And then after that, because I could see, you know, I could make a statement against the defendant, whatever they're called,
Sure.
the respondent, and just have it so open-ended, cause so many questions, just toss that beach ball out there and see where everyone smacks it around. And at that point, the respondent might want to go, no, that was not at all how it happened. But that could also be their closing argument.
So before the hearing, when they submit all their stuff, I mean, we will have time to review all that before we get to the hearing, correct, or not?
Okay, so the stuff that you'd asked the city to provide, we will provide to you at the meeting. Anything that you look at has to be done in a public
Oh,
forum.
okay.
We're
So
not
we-
sending it to you at home for you to look at
Right.
it there. It's gotta be, you know, in a public meeting for other people to see.
I had that question, like, so if we're actually having to read through pages, just hypothetically, like if there were, you know, ordinances that we have to review, or, I mean, we have our code, but whatever the documents might be, because it's hard to say hypothetical.
So what I'm envisioning is that it's gonna be like this, where it's either attached to an agenda item, or like planning and zoning where you have plats. And, you know, you obviously you can't pull up a plat.
Right.
I'm not sure if you've ever seen a plat. These are
Yes.
some pretty big Mylars. You can't pull that up on a computer screen. And so those are delivered to you in person.
Mhm.
So it would either be, depending on the size and what you've asked for, and maybe even the sensitivity of what it was, it'll either be attached to the agenda items, so 72 hours before the meeting gets called. It'll be up there and you can read it at home. You just can't discuss it with anybody. We're gonna ask, don't drive over there and look at the magic fountain and see if the genie really popped out or not.
The park where they had the wedding.
Yeah, the park or the wedding, or they carved the name on the tree. So we could give you the information ahead of time, but it's presented to you You know, we'll come up and you'll say, you have requested the following documents, and the chair will say, we have been provided this, and you'll read it off.
Okay.
So we've been provided
So similar to the
ordinance 1, 2,
articles.
3, 4, that's 5 pages. Yes.
So
you'll
like
have-
how you attach it, we have it, you know. certain
Yes,
amount
you'll
of time
have it
and we can-
ahead of time, but you won't discuss it, and there will be no discourse for it, but you will say, you know, as you are today, the article from Granbury, the article from Dallas, and so you'll acknowledge what it is, and then you'll discuss
Cause I don't wanna be sitting in a public forum, like just
Just
Yeah.
reading.
let me get my highlighter out.
it. Yes, ma'am.
And realistically, or hypothetically, this would be multiple sessions, multiple
Yes.
meetings, right?
Your
'Cause we have
first
to have
meeting,
Yes or no,
that's within the first 17 days,
Right,
and that's when you
then-
say, hey, staff, give me, I want this stuff.
right, and then within a reasonable amount of time, give them another couple of weeks to gather their stuff, meet with us again,
In a public meeting,
right?
Subpoena the witnesses.
So will it be the defendant and the.
Every
witnesses
DNA lab
at
takes
every
long.
time when we're meeting?
And
What
then,
did you say? I'm sorry.
So,
that depends. Every meeting you have is a public meeting.
Yeah.
And so your first meeting where you decide yes or no, that's a publicly posted meeting. Whether they show up or not, I have no control over that. I suspect that the defendant probably will go, hey, you know,
Yeah.
what's going on here? And you may have people from the neighborhood show up. You know, there's no telling. That's why you were
So-
all interviewed. We think you're strong enough that if your neighbor's standing there watching you, you're still gonna do the right thing because you're not gonna be intimidated by
we
that.
will still be able to have like this
To
type of
that end,
discussion
that's-
even within city.
You will have this discussion with them. So you
That's what I
cannot
was,
go
there's no
into
executive
closed door.
session.
right, so it's a yes or no meeting, then you
No,
think
you're-
1 or 2 presentations of evidence meetings?
Depends on how complicated the complaint
Okay.
is, and as you go through, if you go, oh, wow, that's a great question, I need more information, then you
Okay.
recess and we get you that more information.
All right, and then the final decision, would that be a third, or it's possible?
A tenth,
Okay, but
as many as it takes.
would we deliberate, right? At the same time, they give us the evidence, we deliberate? or
You
they
have
give
to
us the-
deliberate as a group, so,
Okay,
any discussion you have is right there. If you're not comfortable making a decision that day, it's because you didn't need more information,
mhm,
or you shouldn't be on the board if you can't make a decision. I mean, you're given the information, well, because one vote's not gonna make a difference. You need to be, and you don't have the opportunity to go back in the jury room and deliberate. You're up there on the dais, asking questions, going back and forth, saying, well, based on, you know, the picture of the, you know, wedding at the park, we saw the invitation, it looks like it was on this date, okay, and then you go back and forth, and that's when you all make your determination.
So we are sitting in front of the respondent, determining whether or not to fine, shake our finger,
Yes, ma'am.
recall, etc. Just, I'm just making a statement, like
Yes.
that's how.
There is no quiet jury deliberation room. You are deliberating in front of the citizen. That is the transparency of this board. I mean, we have the opportunity, based on the nature of the board, that you could go into executive session and have different discussions. We could have done the interviews in executive session with city council when they adopted the ordinance, thought based on the nature of this, it's extremely important that everything you do be transparent.
That way everyone feels like
Mhm.
the process.
That everybody gets to see the process,
Right.
how fair the process is and why you were chosen.
Where
So
do we do that?
how-
Do we do it in the city council chamber? Or-
Yes, sir.
How long might a hearing go? And just thinking about that and the fact that we may have follow-up hearings, right? So
Um,
what should we be expecting
we
or
would-
planning for?
It depends on what day. Most likely, we would schedule 2 or 3 hour meeting. Just because the nature of getting you there and getting you all the information, trying to do it, you know, not in 30-minute increments. It'll just depend on how much you've asked for. It may just be that we know it's gonna take several days. And so we say, okay, you know, day 1, and we've reserved these additional dates as well. It's not gonna be longer than 4 hours because nobody's attention span can go that long. It's not fair to anybody.
And so we're gonna sit up there and let's say we decide they need some punishment. That entire discussion we then have with each other
Probably.
publicly. Okay, so I say, I think it's at least a letter of admonition. Somebody else goes, I agree.
Electric chair.
Right.
What
Somebody
kind of
else says.
liability do we have with respect to that? I mean, is there protection as to, can we be held, I don't know, responsible? So say we find that this is a violation of the code. We find that, let's take it to the far extreme, that there should be a recall.
So you make a
Can that
recommendation
person
to city
then-
council, and then you post it in the paper, and then some citizen somewhere has to gather enough signatures to be able to have a petition to
Right.
go on the ballot, and then the citizens have to vote in a number high enough to get them to be recalled. Making a suggestion of recall creates no liability. Nothing that you do, as long as your suggestion is reasonable, creates liability. If for
And it's
some reason
only-
someone comes after you, we have insurance to cover that. The city represents you in your official capacity.
Oh, that's right.
And I can tell you that pretty much because you're acting in your official capacity, I'm gonna get summary judgment and you're gonna get out because you cannot be individually liable.
And
So-
Just,
as far as the recall goes,
Yeah, but if someone does a slap on the, someone does something really petty, don't say they should be removed from the board. I mean, your punishment needs to fit the crime.
right,
and if we did recommend a recall, with the exception, it's district vote only, except for the 2 at-large positions.
Mayor is also.
Okay, sorry. So if it's somebody from District 3, only the voters in District 3 can repeal their council member.
Yeah.
If they're citywide or the mayor, then everybody has to vote or gets to vote. The letter from Michelle.
and I wanted to, Rachel, looks like she wanted to chime in a couple times, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to, okay.
We need to give you a
I
bell.
saw you raise your hand a
buzzer.
couple times and we never got over to you, so I wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to provide any commentary.
All good. Thank you.
So in the interest of time,
Yes, please. We have another meeting.
yes, so, may I have a motion to
I make a
adjourn?
motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Okay, I will
You're the
tell-
best.
I will tell you real quick, that Krista, Ann, and Raquel will all be appointed to 3-year terms next week. Krista will be appointed the chair again. We are losing Mary. She is going to go to planning and zoning.
Now I know for sure. I didn't get to see the minutes for sure. I looked for the minute. No, that's good. That's good.
Okay, so,
You know, you're
still-
covered by this
Natalie, am I
document.
still streaming?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm turning it off right now.